Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans giving you the news, discussion, and of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's works and the Cosmere. I'm Eric, and joining me is Ian.
Hey, I'm WeiryWriter.
Also joining me is Evgeni.
Hi, I just popped out of the spiritual realm right there, and I am joining y'all for this episode. It's Argent.
Also joining me is Joshua.
Hey, I identify as jofwu on the 17th shard.
Yep. And I'm Chaos, and...
Oh, that was an identity joke, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I was going to take that differently. So today, guys, we are going to talk about some spiritual mumbo jumbo. We're going to talk about, well, really some terms that are connected to spiritual realmy things. We're going to talk about connection, identity, fortune, that stuff, and maybe we'll get to some other terminology, but probably not.
We might talk about destiny.
It's always a possibility.
That's right. So, let's start with talking about a little bit about the spiritual realm and the spirit web.
So I'm gonna take this opportunity to do a brief, hopefully, overview of.
All right, see you in an hour.
Realmatic theory.
Oh God, I will see it. I'll see it in two. I'll see it in 2 hours then.
Come back for the next episode when I'm done.
Jesus. Actually, this is an intro to the Cosmere episode where Argent talks about realmatic theories.
We'll get to those one day.
One day.
Channeling my inner Shay. Everything in the Cosmere exists in three realms. Physical realm is the thing you see, the thing you touch, the thing you're familiar with. Cognitive realm is the realm of the mind and thought, and things they are affected by how they are perceived and thought about in the physical realm. And then there's the spiritual realm, where all the mumbo jumbo is. That's kind of the blueprints for all of the other things. Everything has a spiritual aspect, and that is sometimes referred to as its soul, and it has properties, and it has quote unquote genes,
spiritual DNA,
yeah, things like that. And that kind of defines the ideal state of the object or the person or the subject. And that is then affected, well, it's not affected by the cognitive, but it is expressed through the cognitive and into the physical. And so if you change the spiritual aspect of something, you are changing the cognitive and the physical. And if you change the cognitive aspect of something, you are probably changing just the physical.
Yeah, Brandon has often used the term filtering, where it's like the spiritual gets filtered by the cognitive.
Sure, yeah.
Great. Oh, that didn't take nearly as long as I thought.
Well, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, wow, already. And in the spiritual realm, all things are one. It's not actually a place, really. It's a place, but not a place. That's what Brandon has said before.
Yeah.
It's a different way to view reality.
It's a different level of reality.
Yes and no. The physical realm, things are in specific places, but in the cognitive realm is just a different way of looking at all of that stuff. In a way. It's not a different place. It's all the same places. Your perspective is different.
I always tend to think of it as like a mathematical graph where like everything is like a node that exists in the spiritual realm, and then the connection is the things that's kind of linking them in different ways. And so that's kind of not attached to the physical, but
it doesn't correspond to the physical or the so like if you go from the physical to the cognitive or vice versa, you can kind of map, well, this point in one realm corresponds to this other point in the other realm. You can't do that for the spiritual. So in that sense,
I would argue you can. It's just that distances are meaningless. That so it's like it doesn't make as much sense to view it that way.
Well, if you can't judge distance, then location isn't useful. So then it doesn't really.
But it's like all the things that are in the physical realm are also in the spiritual realm. So it's like there is
but you're not gonna be able to walk in the spiritual realm.
Well,
That's what I'm
no,
saying.
because that's not how the spiritual realm works.
Yeah, I'm
not trying to say you can.
I
Even-
feel
even
like
the-
this is a needless.
Even in the cognitive realm, distances are going to like be a little bit different than what they are in the physical realm. In the spiritual, it's just even like way more warped than that.
And that's the argument I was trying to make. You can do the mapping between the physical and the cognitive, but any mapping you do from these two to the spiritual and vice versa is irrelevant. Like, the distance doesn't matter. Where you map things to don't matter. Like, these two objects are very close in the physical realm and they're very close in the cognitive realm. They can be either very close or very far in the spiritual realm. And so you can't use distance in the spiritual realm to infer anything.
And I'm
about
not
the other two?
trying to.
No. Sure.
Okay.
But that's what I'm trying to say. It is, in a sense, a place in like, it is not a singularity. It's not the pre-Big Bang universe where everything is collapsed in the same place. There locations are still relative there. Like, you can,
Are they?
I mean,
I don't think we know that that's true at all. Brandon has described it as all things are one. That makes it feel like it's like a spiritual singularity thing. You can't walk there. You can't map locations. I mean, yeah, everything is there, but like you can't like take a part of the spiritual realm and say, yes, that's mapped to this other thing. So like location is irrelevant. Time is irrelevant.
I agree that both of those are irrelevant. I'm not convinced that they don't exist in some form. Like,
yeah,
I don't
think
think
all
you
times
can-
exist there.
All times exist there and all places exist there, but they don't overlap. If I can project, so in Mistborn Secret History, right? Kelsier sees into the spiritual realm briefly, and he is, at least in a way, anchored to either where he is or where he is. Like, he sees into the spiritual because he gazes into Preservation's eyes, and Preservation kind of guides him into the spiritual a little bit. And so there is a point of anchor. At that moment, he is not perceiving Odium's connections or Silence's connections. Like, time doesn't, like, time and space don't matter, but they are.
So the metaphor, like I just thought of, is if you're looking at a movie, it's in what you're watching a movie. Things progress linearly through time, but you could also look at like the film negatives, and it's like it's every point exists. Like you can see all of them. That is the spiritual realm. All times exist there, but time has no meaning there because it's not progressing linearly.
Sure. Let's talk about
Okay.
spiritual properties.
Now that we all understand how the spiritual realm works.
Yeah, we know all about it. So what is a spirit web?
We did briefly mention it, right? We talked
Yeah.
about spiritual DNA. We this idea that everything that is you or is that thing is sort of encoded in some way in the spiritual realm.
Kind of all of the connections that make a person that person, and all the other bits and pieces that go into
So
what is a person.
it's the spiritual aspect, right?
Mhm.
The same way you have a physical aspect and that's your body, you have a cognitive aspect and that's your mind, you have a spiritual aspect and that's your soul.
Is the spirit web the same as the spiritual aspect?
Yes.
I would say that it is.
Yeah. I guess I just thought there was a slight distinction with that.
I don't
But-
know if we have an explicit confirmation that they are one and the same, but the way I've seen them used has always been kind of
Yeah.
interchangeable in my mind. So maybe there's a difference, but if there is, I can't pinpoint it.
I'm
because
pretty
it
sure
is
this has been
spiritual realm.
asked, but
Hmm.
okay. So from the Firefight Chicago signing,
Mhm.
Kyrgyzstan asks, can you explain the relationship between spiritual DNA, spiritual aspects in the spirit web, or are they all just terms for the same thing? Brendan, They are all similar terms for the similar stuff.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks, Kirk.
Similar, not the same thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is not. Well, it is pedantic cast, but hopefully. not.
Yeah.
We could
This is
pedantic
this
all
is
day.
what
And-
this is what we're into here.
Then Kyrgyzstan does go on to say, okay, so it's not like the core spiritual DNA. Then you spread, then things as you spread out is all spiritual aspect. And Brennan says no. So these are all just one thing,
Cool.
effectively.
So the way I've always thought about it is there is I always think of it as a spider web. Probably because Spiritweb, spiderweb, a lot of similar letters, where the strands of the web are your connections, and there is. I was gonna say there is a core somewhere that is you, but there isn't. No, it is all. Well, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry to talk about connection. And
No, I was like, are we talking
Yeah,
about
we're
capital
not.
C connected?
Yeah. No, we're not.
Well-
We're not at connection yet.
Well,
But there are spiritual genes that encode for different attributes or powers or abilities
the main one.
in the other realms.
Yeah,
Everything from your hair color to what magical powers you have.
One of the classic examples of spiritual DNA is how allomancy is passed down. Like just because your parents are allomancers doesn't mean you're going to be an allomancer, because it's a spiritual DNA intermingling and not like regular DNA, for example.
And that's not necessarily inherited the same way as
No.
as regular DNA is.
It will get inherited the way Brandon wants it to get inherited.
That is true. Yeah.
And it doesn't determine like misting type either.
Well,
Or sorry, let me rephrase. If your parents are both the same misting, you will not be that same misting necessarily, or even an allomancer
Correct.
at all.
Yep.
like
And-
your spiritual genes
You
most
definitely do
determine
determine
what kind of
which
misting.
misting you are. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And so when we talk about hemalurgy and it's stealing like chunks from one spirit web and grafting them onto another,
Yep.
it's usually these spiritual genes that we refer to. So you can grab a chunk of someone's spirit web, and that chunk says spiritually, this person is a steel misting. And when you give it to someone else, that now allows the other person to have an expression of those spiritual attributes, ergo they become a steel misting.
And for a Knight Radiant, you have basically the person who's the human basically has a brand come along and essentially grafts directly onto their own spirit web.
I kind of see it as a merge a little bit. So you have one spirit webs here, and if you don't have video, too bad. But one spirit webs here, one spirit webs here, and they kind of merge
Mesh together
a little
to some
bit.
extent.
Yep.
Yeah, to some extent.
With
Yeah.
them becoming more enmeshed with each other, the stronger the bond.
Why did I think this episode wouldn't be ultra pedantic cast? I don't know. Why did I? Of course
Mistakes
it
were
would.
made.
Yeah. No, I mean it's just what this is gonna be. Let's. I think we gotta talk about connection, because like it's so hard to talk about any of this stuff without talking about connection.
Yeah.
So, what is connection? Capital C.
Connection is the thing that links all these spirit webs together in different ways.
Yeah. Yes. I
That's
would
my
say
simple
that.
definition.
And to platonic ideals. It's really
Okay.
hard to explain connection without using connecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's the thing that connects everything. It's
Yep.
the glue that holds together the Cosmere.
and you have connections to lots of different things.
I tend to not think of connection as being a thing in and of itself, but more of a way to describe, I don't know, that there's a link there. I don't know that the link itself has any substance to
Oh,
it.
sure. Yeah, no, I'm down with that.
But you can steal connections, and you can
Right, but
move
that would be like
connections.
taking the wire and plugging it in somewhere
yeah.
else.
Right, but
But
the
you can
wire is
have
still
blank
there.
connection.
Right.
So it's
there's
not
a-
connecting to anything.
Oh, see, I would
But
think that is. I think it implies that it's connected. There is something on the other end of that connection.
Well, blank connection is a little weird.
Oh, we can talk about that when we get to
Yeah. We'll talk about that.
the parchment in a minute, I think.
But I think connection itself is it's not just a way to describe a relationship between two things or two people or two spirit webs. It like there is actual spiritual substance to these connections, and it could be very ephemeral as far as those things go, but the fact that you can manipulate it directly. So if I'm connected to let's say the land I am from,
Right.
that connection to the land can be manipulated without, like, directly, without manipulating me or the land in the spiritual realm, right? So you're not.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Let's list a few connection examples, so everyone's on the same page.
Do you want to start with that one? Land being connected to the place you're from.
Yeah,
That's an important one.
That's a very important thing. That's very prevalent on, or at least relevant for magic users on Cell, connection to where you're from. But everyone has that connection to. I suppose you could have a connection to anywhere if you live there long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way I see it, you can anything and anyone you've ever interacted with, you establish a connection with. It's kind of a way to keep. So you've heard of the 6 degrees of separation, right? How you can go from one person to another by going through mutual acquaintances. It's kind of like that, right?
But in the spiritual realm.
But in the spiritual
Yeah.
realm, where place and time, yeah. So it's
Great.
if you are in a place, you kind of establish it's a way of record keeping in a way. And if you're in a place and you're hanging out in that place, you don't have to be from that place. You establish a connection, and the longer you stay in that place, the stronger your connection to that place is. The same way, the more you interact with someone, or the deeper your interaction with someone is, the stronger your connection with that person is.
Right. You'd probably have like a pretty strong spiritual connection with, say, your wife or your
Or parents or
yeah.
siblings.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And I would venture and argue that if, let's say, you have a sibling and you were separated from that sibling at birth, there is still a connection there in the spiritual realm.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like because of your parents.
Yeah, it's just like, this is your sibling. It might not be a strong connection because you've never interacted with
Right.
them, but that's still there.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and a lot of these connections don't necessarily have to deal with magic at all, but a lot of the instances we're about to talk about are intrinsically related to magic because these spiritual properties are related to the Cosmere and were therefore related to magic. Connection to preservation, if you have enough of it, that's what grants allomancy.
Yep.
And so Lerasium gives you like a super connection to preservation and like grafts that into the spirit web.
Yeah.
So without Lerasium,
Yep.
so we know that humans on Scadrial were created directly
Yep.
by ruin and preservation, and there is more preservation in
Yep.
them than there is ruin, which I think means that if you take the spirit web of a human from Scadrial, one, that's probably murder, but two, more of that spirit web is of preservation than it is of ruin.
Yes.
Because they are crafting those things.
I think it's not easy to like just lay it out in terms of this percent preservation, this percent ruin, because like there's lots of things in a spirit web in your spiritual aspect. So, and how does that spiritual DNA work or intermingle is not obvious. But however that works, there's some more connection to preservation than ruin in some respects. I can't hazard a guess to how.
Yeah, it's not something you could measure necessarily, but like it is like more preservation than ruin. How much more? Bleh, what does that even mean? Bleh? But
right.
But then the amount of connection can shift over time because for
right.
the obvious, we see Kelsier is obviously more connected to ruin. So
Yeah,
something
true.
over the course of his life.
But his
shifted.
spirit web, by its very nature of its creation, is still more of, in its material, it's more of preservation.
I guess
I would agree with that.
Okay, weird
Mhm.
metaphor, but I guess I don't see why you couldn't have spiritual chromosomes where some are like more of preservation, and that's like the allomancy part, and then there's other parts that Kelsier would be more connected to ruin, and I'm sure it gets very complicated, is what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
But Brennan has very explicitly stated in Hero of Ages that Scadrians are more of preservation than
Yeah, no,
Galarians.
absolutely. It's just, yeah, like someone who is destructive on Scadrial has more of a definitely has a connection
Mhm.
to ruin,
Yeah.
right?
And it's like you can have connections to shards that aren't part of your makeup. Like shards investiture
That's true.
exist like across the
That's
cosmos.
right.
It's like,
That's right.
so it's like, yes, these are like mostly of preservation and ruin, but there could still be some honor investiture in there just from the background shardic investor radiation.
Investor radiation. Yes.
But the direction I was trying to spin this,
Yes.
and I'm not sure if this is valid anymore, is that by virtue of having a bunch of preservations investiture in your spirit web, just because like you were created by that investiture, that investiture of preservation would by default be capital C connected to preservation.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
And-
yes,
and-
absolutely.
And that's how you would be getting your allomancy. The fact that there's so much there.
You know,
I mean, obviously there's still the snapping, but
that's actually really interesting because that kind of shows that things move across connections. Like capital C connections. Like the wire metaphor, right? There's you have like some sort of conduit to preservation. Well, the fuel is coming from preservation.
Yep.
Right? So these connections you can definitely move investiture through them. Right?
and that is in some ways the basis for a 4,000 word theory I put up on the forums the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
A lot of it was arguing that, hey, if you have the investiture of a shard, any shard, in your spirit web, in a substantial amount, not just the trivial background, hey, I hate my neighbor, therefore I am a Vodian.
Today or something.
Today, yeah, they didn't pick up after their dog. If you have a substantial amount of a shard's investiture in your spirit web, whether that is through a Nahel bond, introducing a lot of honor and or cultivations investiture, whether it is by being a fused, because odium just pumped you full of odious investiture. The fact that you have that in your spirit web directly means that A, you are very strongly connected to that shard, and B, you might have access to that shard's invested art, depending on other circumstances as well.
On a generic sense, I agree with that. Like investiture is very related to all this because your soul's kind of investiture in some respects. Kinda.
I would say that it is,
but Brandon's also said like it's all kind of interchangeable. Matter and energy and investiture, they're all somewhat interchangeable. So saying it's like it has things
in the spiritual realm, like you're not going to have matter. You're going to have investiture.
Right.
So
yes. True.
Almost
true,
by
true,
definition, your spirit web has to be made of investiture.
Yes. Yeah. That's very true.
It's interesting how in the spiritual realm it is all investiture or almost all investiture. Maybe there's like energy in there. And in the cognitive realm, it is probably mostly investiture, but in a lot of cases it behaves like matter, and there is some matter in some cases. And in the physical realm, it is mostly made of matter and energy. And infrequently you see like actual investiture manifest, but it also manifests with almost matter-like properties, like a cell in the a spren in the physical realm.
Yes.
It's not matter. It doesn't behave like matter, but in a way it is, because like the Spren has a body and it can interact weakly with a lot of matter. So it's I don't think there's anything deep to read into that, but it's an interesting thematic
Yeah.
shift of mostly physical to mostly investitorial.
Investitorial? Is that what
Yeah,
you
I don't
just
know.
said?
There's no such word. I had to make something up.
Yeah, that's like conspiratorial, but investitorial. Like, aha! Other connections. Speaking, kind of what going off what you were saying, like connection to a shard. Let's talk about that thing that the Eyrie were trying to do in Mistborn Secret History. They had this orb, and by design, it was meant to connect they wanted the Eyrie members to be connected to preservation, to pick up preservation once Laris died. Once the vessel died.
Yep.
And so that is very interesting, how it seems that you need a connection to a shard to pick it up.
That makes sense to me, though.
And to hold it, by the way.
It definitely makes sense. I suppose I was just thinking about it in the implications for what happened in the Shattering. Scadrians automatically have a connection to ruin and preservation.
Yeah.
Kelsier didn't have as strong of a connection as he needed to hold preservation well. Vin had, obviously, a very strong connection there in that way. It makes sense, because those people all have ruin and preservation in them because they were made by that. How does that work on other planets, and how that worked at the Shattering? Like, if you have these 16, well, plus Hoyd people, what guarantees that they could even pick up the shards, or did this connection requirement happen over time?
It's suggestive to me that they knew what the shards would be, and they picked people who would
It's just very interesting
fit with certain ones.
But like that's a very interesting thing with like Ati and stuff, right? Like,
well, so because we know that Ray's obviously matched what he picked out. I kind of get the sense that, well, I was going to talk about Tanavast, but he could have been shaped by honor over time.
I guess the important thing is that these sort of spiritual connections don't mean, like, when Vin is strongly connected to preservation, that doesn't mean she's not very destructive in many aspects, right? Like, she's not like the ideal of preservation. That's not what that means.
So to go back to the Shattering, it's
yeah.
Before that, the intents of the shards did not exist. Like, those are a function of the Shattering. Like, they could have ended up, the fact that it was these 16 intents wasn't a given. They probably had ideas on what sort of things would emerge, but it could have been a different 16 set of things.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. We do have a word of Brandon on that.
So their innate investiture would have been of Adonalsium in its entirety. So that might have been able to allow them to bypass
pick up any shard that they wanted there.
That's a possibility. But the moment Adonalsium shatters, all of those connections would have had to be quote unquote colored differently.
Yeah.
It is possible, I think, that the original 16 shards they themselves were and probably still are connected to one another because they were a part of a whole.
They would have to be, right?
And so they could have all kind of inherited this. So the original vessels are connected to Adonalsium. Adonalsium shatters, and now those connections that were pointing to Adonalsium, maybe they just kind of split to point to the entire group of shattered pieces, right?
Yeah.
Or individual shards could have inherited individual connections. Or at the very beginning, like, those shards could have initialized themselves with very little connection and connection requirements.
We don't know exactly when the original vessels ascended. Was it the instant that the
Yeah.
shards were created? Was it
Were they
moments
laying
after?
around for like 20 minutes? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And when was the formation of the intents instantaneous at the shattering?
Yeah.
Did they ascend as those intents were forming themselves?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And with AT in particular, I don't know if it's a fact or just a very popular theory. So there's a moment in Secret History, I think, where Laris talks about how AT was always he would talk about the inevitability of like time grinds everything in the end kind of
Yeah.
philosophy. I
Yeah.
don't remember the exact quote, but that's the kind of philosophy that AT has always had, even
Is
though
that-
he was
is that
kind
what-
and generous.
Is that what Lara said? I guess that just that wasn't the implication that I had on that. That it was a thing that AT's original vessel possessed.
AT's original vessel?
Yeah, Ruin's original vessel. Before that person picked up Ruin, that was a thing that AT felt.
So in Secret History,
Mm-hmm.
Fuzz. So when the Lord Ruler leaves, they talk about some stuff, and Fuzz says, "I should not have been so hopeful. Everything passes. Nothing is eternal." That's what AT always claimed.
It's not exactly clear when he was claiming that.
Always.
Always? Okay.
That's what
Yeah.
AT always claimed.
I like this idea that they were already matching whatever shards they were going to pick.
And-
yeah,
and so the point is-
It's speculation, but it's
AT was not like he was a kind of generous man. He was not
Yeah,
ruinous,
right.
but ruin is also change and entropy, and
Yeah,
so in
and-
that
sure.
sense, they were a good fit.
And Brandon has said that because of Ati's views on these things, he was able to steer Ruin more towards the entropy, like inevitable, like riding down, rather than just wanton destruction.
Yep.
Right.
Like another
Yeah,
person,
yeah.
it could have just been like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna burn the world down because
This
it's
would-
fun.
This would be a great
I'm gonna
question.
burn
for
the world down because that's what's going to happen.
Yes, Josh.
This would be a great question for Brandon, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Did all the vessels that picked up a shard at the shattering have connection with the shard that they picked up?
That's ultra gonna be a Raffo, but that's
Mhm.
definitely a good question to ask.
And
Ultra Raffo.
Ultra Raffo.
You could narrow down on a specific vessel. He might answer that one.
Yeah.
yeah, and so there's also kind of two forms of connection to a shard, I would say. There's
yeah.
the like, I have a lot of this shard in me. That's like the brute force thing that the connection orb did, so to speak.
Yeah.
Then there's the like, I am thematically in line with this shard.
Yeah.
So it's like Kelsier was thematically aligned with Ruin, even though he technically speaking had more of preservation in him, because he's a Scadrian and all Scadrians do.
I would argue that those are the same.
I think it gets pretty tough to classify types of connections because ultimately people have many different connections to a huge amount of things.
Yeah. It's
So-
like functionally speaking, they are the same. Like you can simulate having a thematic connection with just dumping in a whole bunch of investiture.
I
Yes,
see what
But
you're
it's like,
saying.
you don't necessarily need that.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree.
The distinction for me
yeah.
is like a natural connection versus like one that's artificial, one that's being created by some kind of magic or something.
Laracium.
I don't think there's a functional difference between the two,
Well, yeah.
except that maybe like one is temporary or something, or
Yeah. Or-
leakier.
Technically, what Kelsier's not Kelsier, Dalinar is doing with spiritual adhesion. He's forging a connection with somebody.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's another great example of connection where he spiritually sticks to something else and gets a connection, like an Azish person, and so then he can speak Azish.
You know what I think is important here? I think a lot of our understanding on how connection and spirit webs work is going to hinge on whether we believe that every connection a person forms is a part of that person's spirit web or soul or spiritual aspect, or whether it is kind of just like tacked on. And so if you are stripped of all of your connections, are you still yourself, or are you now like completely mangled as a spiritual entity?
I think you're completely mangled as a
you're
spiritual.
completely mangled. The example that I think is with the singers. Like they had their connection ripped out. They are not the same people. Like just like thinking about what was one of the examples we had of connection to, your home, right? Like
Mhm.
the Everstorm connection refounded, identity restored, right? And so if you were stripped of those connections, that doesn't mean that the singers don't have connection. Like the present day
Yeah,
singers did
Yeah.
to Alethkar and their homeland, but
Yeah, like functionally speaking, I think if you destroy all of the connections to the rest of the Cosmere, like you cease to exist. There's
you're
like
dead.
the spirit realm is itself a massive spirit web of the Cosmere with all the little
Right,
things
yeah.
that make up the Cosmere. So
Yeah.
it's like if you just like disappear from that, like the Cosmere doesn't know that you exist. So you don't exist,
sure.
which is
So
frankly terrifying.
I do happen to believe the same, and so I think what this means, I think the fact that you are in some way your connections
Mhm.
plus some more,
Yeah.
means that if you were to establish new connections, whether they are magically induced, temporary via connection juice or whatever, those connections are just as viable part of you as your quote unquote naturally formed connections. And
Yeah.
so if you were to connect yourself to a shard by taking a shower in a connection juice, you are,
As you do.
as you do, you are just as good of a candidate to pick that shard up as you would be if you had naturally led a life that had connected you to that shard thematically because you were preserving or honorable or destructive or whatever.
Yeah,
In
I would agree.
general, yes, unless you are like your very being is diametrically opposed to like what that shard is. Because
Well,
like Kelsier, like yes, he was able to ascend, but because he was very much more in line with Ruin, and Ruin was so diametrically opposed to preservation that he had a hard time using the power.
I think with preservation, it's kind of a deceptive example because preservation chose Vin. And like we don't know what level that influenced how well Kelsier could use preservation.
also true, yeah.
From granted, I haven't reread Secret History in a very long time. That when he was preservation for a time,
Yes.
that his perception of why he was having so much trouble was because he wasn't in line with preservation as a person. And at that
Here's the
point,
thing.
if he would know that, like, he knew that preservation had chosen Vin, he was just holding the power for a while. But I never got the perception that that was why he couldn't use the power, or he thought that was why he couldn't use the power.
I don't think so. Yes, I mostly or completely agree with you. I don't think that changes what I said though. I
Yeah.
think like
Yeah.
everything I said is fine, but you also have other connections that can interfere with all the stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
I think Vin had an easier time because preservation chose her, though.
Because she was a better candidate. Like, she, by her very nature, was a better candidate for preservation. There's a reason preservation didn't choose Kelsier.
Yes, but like I guess I just feel like there's a mechanical thing that preservation did in that choosing, and like I couldn't hazard a guess to how much effect what that's like.
I have a guess, and you're all gonna hate it.
Okay.
The reason,
Oh no,
yeah, I'm going there.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I'm going. Preservation chose
Uh-huh.
Vin
Uh-huh.
because time doesn't matter in the spiritual realm.
Vin was
And
chosen
Vin-
as preservation because she will be preservation.
Yeah. One day Vin was going to be a Job just leaves because one day she was going to be a very good candidate to ascend to preservation, and so that choice made a lot of sense. And preservation as a shard who is well capable at seeing the future or divining the future would have followed these connections into the future and realized that this is a good choice.
Going back to, is there a mechanical thing going on? My perception was the mechanical thing going on was preservation was preparing her to take up the power. Like he was like, she was taking in the mist, attuning herself more to preservation. So it's like she would be a good vessel. Like all of the like mechanical stuff going on was happening inside Vin, not inside preservation.
But she took in the mists because preservation had already chosen her.
Yeah, like I'm just looking at
Yes,
the.
he had chosen her, so he started preparing her as a vessel.
I guess I consider that to more be that preservation forged a special connection which allowed Vin to pull upon the mist. If Vin didn't exist, could someone have taken up preservation? Yes, but I don't think that person could have necessarily like drawn upon the mists as Vin had. Because Vin has this special connection that preservation made. And
I
that was
think
made at a
actually
young
yes.
age before like she could live a life in line of preservation. Like she does lots of destructive things.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think that this proves what I said.
I sympathize with the listeners who don't have a strong opinion either way.
Yeah, this is like me earlier in the show here.
I think connection is going to be the answer to everything here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And maybe like because space and time don't matter in the spiritual realm, maybe you can forge a connection with someone's future spiritual aspect, or form a future connection, or maybe preservation forged a connection with Vin when she was very young or before she was born, and because time doesn't matter, that connection would have been there until the very end and made it easier for Vin to either follow a path of preservation or to simply live her life as it would be and then ultimately ascend with greater success than other candidates would have.
I don't feel that a shard can automatically just pick their successor. Like if they're gone, the most suitable person ascends. Like the first person who is suitable ascends. Whether or not that is who they pick.
But by picking someone, they could make it easier for that person to grow into becoming the most suitable.
Yes. Yeah. But that doesn't automatically determine.
Well, no,
reality.
nothing is 100% guaranteed. Nothing is 100% automatic. But it's like
they're stepping on the scale. They're like influencing things in a certain direction, but they can't pick.
The same way fortune is not a sure-proof way of seeing the future. You can still make decisions based on more likely or less likely outcomes. I think this follows the same theme here.
Yeah.
I want to say that while time doesn't matter in the spiritual realm, I feel like I tend to go back to what Ian was saying at the very beginning about that time still has some it matters in some way.
Mhm.
Because I really don't like the idea that preservation can connect with future Vin to
Yeah,
do things
I
in the
don't
past.
like
I think that
either.
there's still
The present is still the present.
time is encoded like in where things are, like in some way.
I'd say all times are encoded.
Yes, exactly.
But
I
the
want to go.
future isn't set
Yeah.
There's a
until
very
it's the present.
there's a very small kind of example of, I guess, what I'm thinking of in Oathbringer with Syl. There's that scene when they are visiting Hearthstone at the beginning, and she's like, oh, there was another voice, and she is referring to. There's a lot of speculation about what that means. I've always felt like it's referring to Oradin. I don't want to get too far off track.
What voice? I have no idea what you're referring to.
When they
Like,
are
I need the exact
yeah,
context.
Okay, this is Oathbringer, chapter 6. Kaladin is reconnected with his parents. They're in Hearthstone, and it says, Syl walked up to him in the air. They're like I remember them, referring to his family. Remember then, Kaladin whispered. Syl, you never knew me when I lived here. That's true, she said. How can you remember them? Kaladin said, frowning. Because I do, Syl said, flitting around. Everyone is connected, Kaladin. Everything is connected. I don't know you then. I didn't know you then, but the winds did, and I am of the winds. And they
Okay.
kind of chat about that, and then she says, besides, there was another voice, pure with a song like tapped crystal, distant yet demanding. She smiled and zipped away.
Okay. There we go. Context.
That's
is
the
helpful.
context.
Thank you.
There's a lot of like theories about what she's referring to. I always thought it was kind of this obvious that she's referring to Kaladin's new younger brother. They're talking about his family. They're talking about these people that she remembers, and she's like, oh, look, I remember there was another one, even though that one wasn't there before.
Yeah, I don't.
So this whole, like, the way that time is, it matters but it doesn't, to me, that is a picture of that she was connected. She remembers them even though she's never met them, so time doesn't matter. But there's still this sense of an order of when things happen. Like, I don't know that Syl, a year ago, several months ago, when she like first showed up, I don't know that she would have quite these same memories.
Let me ask you a question.
Way of Kings chapter 2, if Kaladin was like, hey, do you know who my parents are? She'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that's also her growing more like aware.
Okay.
But
And
sure.
also connected
Words of
more
Radiance,
with
chapter
Kaladin,
1.
right? So like growing that connection would probably
It matters, yeah.
yeah.
also, what we see here is Syl in the present is remembering something in the past, kind of indirectly through Kaladin.
Yeah.
But that is in the past. Like, I don't think that regardless of how strong their connection is right now, she can go, oh, I remember this thing you're gonna do next year.
Correct.
Yes.
Not without like a massive amount of fortune or anything like that.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Can I just complain for a second on how Syl doesn't capitalize connection in this? Like, I would like to simply point out that is irritating, that is not capital C connection when it is clearly talking about capital C connection.
Yeah, but lowercase connection is a superset of capital C. Like,
Yep.
any a lot of the times you can use capital C connection, you can also use lower C connection and still mean the same thing.
Stupid. Oh, like,
If I am capital C connected to my homeland, I am also lower C connected to my homeland.
yeah.
But it is infuriating.
Yeah, it just is. Like, if we have a capital term and we're talking about a term in the Cosmere, capitalize it.
But I don't think she was necessarily using the capital C connected there.
That's
like,
the thing.
That was not her intention to use another.
That was
capital-
bad.
Capitalized word in the Cosmere.
Intention,
Yes.
yeah. Except when Odium doesn't use it, even by intent. Driving me insane. A few other things on connection. We talked about the singers briefly, and losing connection. Bad. Connection's a thing you can store. In Ferrochemy, we obviously see those in the medallions and can have similar language abilities, although that's more of a proto version because
Yes.
Alex still has an accent.
Check out our episode from last week for more about that.
I actually
Yeah.
don't know if that episode's appearing in the week before, but either in the spiritual realm, that
doesn't
episode
matter.
has that we did a podcast on language and connection, either last week or next week.
Yes.
Or we will have done
Yes,
a
yes,
podcast
that's right.
in language.
AKA we recorded it.
Episode will be posted at some point
Yes.
in time.
Yes, we record in the future or
It's
the
true.
past. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, no.
That's right. Let's talk about identity. What's identity? Capital I identity. Must be noted.
It's kind of the term I want to use is a different, completely unrelated
Cosmere
term in the Cosmere.
Yeah, it's tough. It's
So
tough,
I was
right?
like, I can't use that because I want to
Identity
use
is-
the harmonic resonance that denotes you, but
Oh, right.
resonance is a term.
Yeah. You go listen to our episode about resonances as well.
Yeah. Because it's like how everything in the universe like has its own frequency. All the investiture like that is attuned to you has your same frequency.
I guess
but
I just
that's
refer to it as like just a marker. It's the part of your spirit web that it identifies you as you and not someone else.
Yeah.
It's to me it's almost maybe the thing that connects the physical and cognitive nature of who you
Oh.
are with the spiritual sense of who you are.
It's a dangerous word you use there.
Yeah, that sentence that you have there has a lot of implications that I don't know how in depth I want to go on that.
yeah. It's like I kind of like that, and it goes back to the idea before of is there a center to your spirit web? I think if there was, like, that would be your that node would be your identity.
I don't know if it's necessary for us to define identity very formally and very strictly.
Yeah.
In pretty much all instances I can think of, it's just the stuff that makes you you and your stuff your stuff. And obviously the definitions of you and stuff are very broad here, but as a in terms of explanation,
Yeah.
I think this works.
As an example, a fair chemist storing something into their metal mines have their own identities keyed to it, and other fair chemists can't draw upon that.
Or a windrunner using a basic lashing. Is that the adhesion one?
No, that's a full lashing. Basic
Okay.
lashings are gravitation things.
Okay, so a full lashing to like spray investor on the floor and making it sticky. It's like that investor still has their identity, so they can.
Right. Yeah.
Retrieve.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So this is a pervasive thing in magics.
Or Shallan's illusion, the fact that she can control them and
exactly.
draw the stormlight out of them.
Yeah. I don't really think that like the spirit web has to have like a central node, because I think identity is like pervasive through your spiritual aspect.
Yeah,
Like,
it kind of the part of your spirit web that has your identity, like that's the dividing line between what is your spirit web and what is everything else. It's the stuff.
Yeah,
with your
yeah, because I guess everything would have
Sure.
spiritual webs, right? And like,
Mhm.
hey, no, this is my spirit web.
That's probably a good way to describe. And then anything you do magically kind of leaves your identity imprint on that stuff. So you create an illusion, and in terms of sheer like pure investiture, the illusion one Lightweaver creates is probably no different from that another Lightweaver creates, except for the identity.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
separates them.
and basically it's still saying it's like the investor in this illusion is still thinking like, hey, I'm part of this person.
Yeah.
Rather than just free flowing investiture.
Right. And just another example is like storing breaths in something, awakening. Like
Mhm.
a random person can't go up to a thing Vasher did and take its breaths out. Vasher has to do that.
And that is probably why you also can't just take someone's breath. They need to give it up freely.
Yes.
The same way you can't steal the stormlight from a light woven illusion because of identity.
Unless
One
you're
of
a
the-
Larkin.
But if you're Larkin, you can also probably steal breath.
Yes,
That's probably true.
almost
Yeah,
certainly.
that's probably. Oh man. Oh wow.
I don't know. That's really scary. I don't know.
Oh, that's terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Larkins
Well,
are terrifying.
I feel like with Larkin, I feel like it's a lot easier for a Larkin to eat an illusion, which obviously they do, right? We see that in that Risen interlude where the Larkin eats the illusion off that fused, right? But that's different than taking the innate investiture inside you.
Yeah,
Like
I guess
that's I feel like there's just more of a barrier of entry, right, on that.
Sure.
Yeah, it's
But
like
breath
whatever.
is also give upable. Like it is innate investiture, but it's not all of your innate investiture. It is a part that's designed to be transferable.
I think breath is a little more sticky.
It is.
But
Yep.
I feel like when it sticks to something sapient, I feel like it will be harder for a Larkin to eat it.
Yeah, well,
Agreed.
breath is more physical than the rest of your innate investiture. Ish.
Maybe.
And so, like,
it's
regardless-
visible at least.
yeah,
So.
whatever mechanism the Larkins are using to override the identity lock to get the investiture, like, it's not going to override the core of your identity. Like, it can't overcome, like, and take your investiture.
I guess, yeah.
Do you think
Larkin.
the stickiness of investiture is related to identity?
No.
No.
Define stickiness.
There's
that facial expression is completely deserved, Josh. I understand, but like, I mean, breath has been described as more sticky than Stormlight, for example.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
that's
There's
what
a
I
very
was going off
specific-
of.
The idea then would be that investiture is more like attached to some person or something. But then if an illusion is, I don't know.
So the word of Brandon you're thinking of, and the one I was thinking of and looking for, describes these things in terms of just how the investiture was designed to be. So Stormlight, by its very nature, is meant to be kind of a part of the cycle of life on Roshar. So it has a very not cyclic nature, but it's meant to be used and then recycled and reused a lot. Whereas breath is it's just it's not like that. It's meant to be
just the nature
put
of the
in
investiture
something
itself.
and it yeah.
It's designed to be given, whereas, let's say, preservation stuff, not designed to be given, and not designed to be used like Stormlight at all. One thing that was really surprising of a word of Brandon that I found in researching this is that you look like you do in the you look like you in the cognitive realm because of identity, which totally makes sense, but is also very interesting.
Yep.
The perception of yourself. That you
Yeah, like
have.
I imagine someone like Vasher, who's used to doing perception gimmickry, could make him look like a lot of different things in the cognitive realm.
So what does that mean
Yeah.
for Sprin?
What does it mean for the returned when they return?
With their identity?
Because because this is still your cognitive shadow being attached to your body,
Mm-hmm.
but now you look different, at least in the physical realm.
Well, I think what's going on with that is that might be related, but it's not quite the same thing going on. Because
Yeah, I guess
because
that's true.
Bren look different between the cognitive and physical realm. But so why don't humans look different? It's
Sorry.
because we have a perception of who we are, which is tied into our identity, and so it's we look like we look like because we look like what we look like. It's kind of
Thanks.
cyclical, circular.
So are you
Spiritual
saying
Mumbo Jumbo. And
Well, that would be
cognitive
cognitive.
mum- Yeah,
Cognitive.
sorry. And cognitive mumbo. Well, the identity part's the spiritual part.
romantic mumbo jumbo?
Romantic Mumbo Jumbo.
The mumboest of jumbos.
Yes.
So do
The
you think?
jumboest of the mumbo jumbos.
Do you
These
think
are all
Light
highly
Song-
technical terms.
That's right.
So do you think that Light Song would look like Larimar.
Stenemar.
Larimar. Which one? of these?
Larimar is the priest.
Okay.
Stenemar is Laison.
Would look like Stenemar in the cognitive, even without his remembrance and realization that that's who he is.
Well, this is difficult because at that point in time, Light Song is Light Song. That
And he sees
his
himself
identity-
as Light
Yeah,
Song.
it's the same in the
Yeah.
physical. That's what determines what he looks like in the physical is
It's how he perceives himself.
his perception of his identity.
it's like
So-
he would look like Light Song for the
Okay.
same reason that when Shallan appears in the cognitive realm, she's not 6 years old.
Okay, sure. In that case, do you think that sometime between the moment of death and the moment of return, the way the cognitive shadow looks changes to reflect what the new physicality would look like?
I think it's part of the act of returning. Because
Okay.
whatever mechanism is allowing return to shapeshift, it's trying to like ideals of beauty in that culture and of a
Mhm.
person. So I think that's intentional on the part of endowment, that she is giving them this power to attune to what is beautiful or handsome in the culture.
Man,
Okay.
the more we
I don't-
talk about the stuff that just shows how much we don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, what about Larkins and the implication of Larkins? Like, oh crap, that's not good. What is connection? What is the spiritual realm?
What is identity?
And like, how does Returned work? Warbreaker sequel, please.
Come on, Edgley, we would like to ask you some questions now.
Yes. Oh, let's go through
Please
customs.
don't eat us because you're a giant dragon.
Ah, maybe. And also, identity was removed when Biodemishram was imprisoned. So the singers lost identity.
That is interesting.
That is very interesting.
Practically speaking, what did removing their connection and their identity do to them?
Well, practically speaking, it.
So,
Messed them up.
It turned them into parshmen.
Yeah.
right.
Well,
So,
let's
I mean-
before we answer that,
Okay.
do we agree that this connection removed was explicitly their connection to Biodemishram? Or do we think there was more to this act?
I think
got
there
the
was
sense it-
more to that act.
I think it was like Biodemishram had like a big wire, a big connection wire to them.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
Biodemishram being locked up cut that wire, but also cut others. It ripped out a bunch of hair all at once, rather than just one
Yeah,
hair.
The intention was it was only going to sever that one connection, but
Connections are related to other connections, so it didn't turn
Yeah.
out super great.
Sure,
yeah,
it
the
pulled
the
like
Knights
an
Radiant
entire
did
web.
not know what was going, and they ripped out far more than they were planning. To the fact that
Yeah.
identity was also removed, or
That makes it feel like, just if we're talking like identities kind of dispersed through the spiritual aspect, right? That it's just enough of the spirit web got ripped off that it just lacked enough identity. Kind of like if you stabbed someone with a hemalurgic spike, Brandon said, even if you did hypothetically survive, you would not be the same. I kind of am feeling like when you rip off a chunk of your spirit web, like you're
some
going to be
identity
losing.
does go through that.
Some identity is going to be lost, connections are going to be lost, and you're not going to be the same.
My issue with that, and it might work that way, but my issue with it is that I don't see identity as this as its own thing that is like a blanket on the spirit web. I see
Sure.
that as every node and every connection in the spirit web having a marker. And so if you're storing your identity, you're
Okay,
not removing your identity, you're suppressing that marker. And so if you
Okay, yeah. I'm,
if- you know,
I'm
if-
totally
if-
with you.
if I have a web of strings, right, and they are red in color, if
Right.
I rip half of them, that doesn't make the other half any less red.
And I think part of this is that spiritual realm is weird, and it's not going to adhere to physical realm metaphors. But that is not a useful thing to say. I think that identity is its own thing. It's like you can store it, you can steal it. Like, in some way, it is its own thing. In the same way that, like, connection is its own thing. Even though what that means.
It's like a property, right?
It's a property. That, what if, like, your configuration of your spirit web, like, generates an identity field around it?
Oh, good. Let's add the word field into things. I'm ready. I'm ready to do some vector calculus, guys.
Too much was removed, and it's like that identity field can't generate itself.
Oh, there was a wob.
It's like
identity field.
It's like Mars. Its core cooled down. It can't generate an electric field anymore.
Evgeni,
or a magnetic field.
I will say I totally agree with the marker metaphor rather than a blanket metaphor. I think that's more accurate. And I do agree that, like, hey, you're suppressing that marker by storing identity. Just as a note, storing identity makes you more susceptible to manipulation by other magics, like forgery is an example.
Okay.
Because the identity field isn't acting like a force field anymore.
This is your new favorite thing.
I guess it is. Earlier, when I said it's the part of your spirit web, the thing that delineates your spirit web versus everything else is your identity. It's what's inside the identity field. That's your spirit web, and outside is everything else. It all comes back together.
Oh boy.
With connections crossing that boundary, it may be a little weird.
Well, I think
I see what you're saying.
Totally permeable to connections.
Identity is the magnetic field. Connections are the electric field. Easy.
It's like how you can have.
Oh my god!
Like, I can go through a magnetic field.
One induces the other.
Oh no! It's
you didn't know what you were getting into, listeners, when you decided to click on this. It's like, let's talk about the spiritual realm. It's like, no, we're going to talk about all this other stuff that you didn't expect.
This is all related to the cognitive realm.
It's a physics lecture in disguise.
Let's talk about Stokes'
theorem.
theorem.
It's a mathematics lecture in disguise.
So if we take the gradient of the identity field.
You can't take gradients of vector fields.
Oh,
John.
I'm sorry. Thanks.
So you found a word of Brandon. This reminded you of a thing, Evgeni.
Yeah. So all the talk about identity field made me think of a wob that I thought referenced an identity field, but it doesn't.
What does it say?
But it's interesting.
Okay.
So I asked Brandon about it. So we know that you can't lash people in shard plate, but what if you could touch the person inside the plate? Can you lash that instead? So if they have their helm off, can you, like, touch their forehead and lash them?
Lash just the forehead. Incredible.
And Brandon says the following, which you can read. There's a bit of an interference envelope. Wearing plate.
There's a Cosmere textbook that's just writing furiously. There's an arcanist just writing, and then the identity field interacts with the interference envelope. Incredible.
Wearing plate.
Uh-huh.
The person has this big ball of investiture around them.
Great.
And so pushing any way through it, even by touching a person without a helm, is going to be tough. Easier than with the helm, though, I suppose. Investiture acts roughly like a saturated solution in these cases.
Chemistry. We've got your physics, we've got your chemistry, we've got your philosophy.
Biology, because DNA, spiritual DNA. Easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mentioned spiritual chromosomes, so there you go. Easy.
We are going to educate
history
you,
because
listener.
of, like, time.
Yeah, and philosophy.
That's a stretch. That's a stretch.
All disciplines are one in the spiritual realm.
Oh gosh.
Oh no, I hate everything.
So we're gonna get to the quantum mechanics part of this at some point here, right?
We will, yeah.
That's next episode, actually.
Sticking more power into something like a ferrochemical storage or a hyper-invested object like plate is increasingly hard. The other part is that investiture tends to interfere with other investiture unless there is a familiar resonance, lowercase r.
No!
Yes!
No!
I knew I was right.
Whoa, was this transcribed? Was this transcribed?
This is from Reddit.
Brandon is terrible at capitalizing things.
No, hold up. It
But
gets
that's
better.
not a capital. No,
But
don't
it
say
should
that.
be capital.
Don't say that.
No, it gets better.
No.
Unless there is a familiar resonance. Parentheses. This is part of what philosophers call identity. Capital I.
Yes! Yes!
So Ian's thing about it's like, oh, it's the resonance. Oh my god. Oh no.
Slapping your hand through a sandmaster's stream of sand will cause interference and make them start to drop.
Wouldn't that hurt? Also, that cause some physical effects.
I mean, maybe it's like a small stream of sand. It's not that the sand is supporting them. Oh, so it's a sandmaster levitating on top of a stream.
Yeah.
It's not that the sand is supporting them, it's that
a lot
the
of force.
investiture...
If you move your hand there, you're just gonna like chop your hand off.
Debatable.
Don't do that.
Not necessarily.
That's a lot
It's
of force.
It's that the investiture holding them up gets scrambled for a moment because of your own investiture.
Okay.
That's interesting,
Okay.
actually.
Yeah.
Investiture pushed towards someone inside a hyper-invested, parentheses, super saturated system like person in shard plate is going to get hard pushback. This is similar to the reason that it's harder to push on invested coins. Depends on how invested they are in that case. It's generally not as hard as doing something like lashing a person in a plate. This is more about the interference than the saturation of investiture, but the two principles are what I use to guide the physics in these areas. And then
The
the
Another
physics.
interferent envelope is copper clouds.
Oh yeah.
but the question continues then, but it goes into raffle territory. So.
Right. Well, great. So, we have our identity
What else
field.
is
We
there to
have our
say?
lowercase r resonance that makes up a capital I identity. Great. Easy. Done. Great. Cool.
Yeah. So the important thing here is investiture interferes with investiture. We've known this for a long time.
Yep.
Unless there is unless they quote unquote resonate on the same frequency, and that frequency is
Identity.
part of what we call identity.
Part of. So the identity
of.
field can still exist.
This is
For the record, I don't think it is a literal field because, as I said, it's a spiritual realm. Does
It's a
not
spiritual
operate
field.
on physical.
Oh
spiritual.
yeah, right. Because there's no location. So yeah, obviously.
Yeah, so it's like it is a metaphor to simulate what is happening in the spiritual realm.
What does vector calculus look like in the spiritual realm?
So
Everything
I
is
guess,
zero.
I guess
Oh, that would be
identity then
bad.
is closer to the harmonic resonance Ian was trying to weave in earlier, where it is less of a marker and more of a kind of a natural frequency that your spirit web and your investiture quote unquote vibrates at.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that frequency is used to uniquely identify your stuff as belonging to you. When you're storing identity, you are
suppressing that frequency.
Yeah, like freezing your stuff so it doesn't vibrate, I guess.
So many physics metaphors. This is incredible. Yeah. Just if you forgot, if you are wearing shard plate, you can lash someone else. Like you can lash through your own shard plate. If that is yours.
Yeah. And that is exactly this, unless there is a familiar resonance.
Exactly. I just wanted to make that clear for everyone.
Question.
Uh-huh.
You cannot lash a shard blade because it is super invested. Could Kaladin lash the Sill Spear?
Maybe.
Could he manifest her like as a blade and lash her to something?
That's definitely a combat technique. It's like a summon.
You can't lash to a thing, but
well,
to be pedantic.
how much does Syl match the identity of Kaladin?
Yeah,
That's
that's
kind of the
the
question.
question, really. Yeah.
That's the question.
Hmm.
Are there
Does the-
identity fields too intermingled, and it's fine? They vibrate
Yeah.
on a similar
Because
spiritual
while we still
wavelength?
don't know what Shardplate is, there's the idea that it
That's
is
true.
made out of lesser spren,
Yeah,
which would
Mhm.
theoretically have their own identities.
that is true. That is a good question. Listeners, take notes. You can ask Brandon this. That is a good question. But
That
now I'm
is-
just
yeah.
imagining, instead of throwing Syl at someone, you're just like, I'm just gonna lash the shard blade at someone. It's like, I'll get him eventually, easy. If they break that, then Syl will disappear, and I'll just resummon her, easy. It might be different. I would expect something that is more sapient to have more identity.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
it's hard to talk about because, like, a stick feels it is a stick,
Oh,
and
here goes
that's
the
like
stick.
kind of
I knew it.
well, like, or just like any object. When Shallan manifests it,
I-
it feels that it's what it is.
No, hold up. I think you are starting to conflate identity and innate investiture a little bit.
I don't.
Everything's connected.
So I don't
Yeah, but
necessarily think it's more identity, but it's stronger identity. It's
Sure,
like
sure.
crisper. It's like,
Yeah.
and this probably goes
yeah.
into like a person's perception of themselves
Influences their identity.
influences their identity.
Right,
where
yeah,
it's like
because it has to.
a person has a better understanding of who they are in terms of the greater Cosmere than a stick. Like the stick knows it's a stick. It doesn't know much else.
I don't know if that's relevant.
Yeah, I was just saying that if Syl has more or better identity than, say, lesser Spren, then maybe you just could not push and pull on Syl even if you are Kaladin. That was what I was getting across.
I
But
see.
I could see it going either way, that like their identities are kind of merged a bit due to the Nahel bond.
I know I am me. I am Ian.
Yes.
A stick. I am a stick. I'm a stick. Like, but there's no like functional difference between two sticks. It's like, okay, I'm this stick, but
I
I'm the same as that stick.
disagree with that. Because there are several places where various people interact with Shadesmar beads, and they describe the beads or the objects corresponding to those beads as very specific objects. So this is a sword that feels ashamed because they had broken in battle and they feel like they have failed their owner. Or this is a shield that's satisfied because they have protected their master or something like that. So the stick is maybe not the best like
Yeah.
because part of the goal of that scene is humor.
Yeah.
Hey, you could be far. I'm a stick.
Great
But-
rendition.
There is more complexity to that stick than
Yeah.
Wait,
than
so
just
that just makes me think that each bead kind of has its own spirit web, right? And it would have some sort of identity because it's an individual thing, and
Yeah.
maybe that spirit web is what's making it a bead. Straight up.
I really don't want to talk more about perception, but perception is important in the Cosmere.
Yes, it is.
Humans' perceptions of like the sword that shattered or the shield that defended its masters could be fueling its
It's own
the
sense.
formation of its own identity. It's just like
Yeah,
we are
yeah,
viewing
yeah.
it as
yeah.
this is the sword that broke in battle. Like this is the shield that protected its master.
Yep.
Even if we're not consciously thinking that's going to fuel the object thinking like that.
Yes.
sure.
And it is important for everyone to know that like these spiritual ideals, the spiritual properties, these aspects change over time. The cognitive influences the spiritual, and
Mhm.
for exactly
vice-
this reason. Like as you change, your connections will change. As you see yourself differently, you will have different sorts of like your identity is slightly different. You're still you, but like Dalinar sees himself as someone different than he was earlier in his life.
I mean, the same way that 20-year-old Dalinar and 50-year-old Dalinar are both Dalinar, but
Yes.
they are very different people.
Yes.
So I don't think their identity would change. I think that's the thing that never changes. It might strengthen or weaken, but
I think there's layers to it.
yeah, but its nature doesn't change.
Yeah.
Because
Perhaps.
it's like, if Dalinar was a Frug Mist,
Yeah.
no matter at what point in time,
True.
he would be able to access his,
that is
it
true.
wouldn't
That's
change in that way.
true. That is true.
It's not all or nothing. It's your identity is made up of a lot of things.
Your frequency is the same, but the amplitude of that frequency can change depending on
Yes.
welcome back.
Yep.
Your frequency is the same, but your identity can be louder or bigger or quieter and small, depending on whether you're storing or tapping identity. But maybe there are natural forces where the strength or weakness of your identity can be modified without you actually changing your identity.
Yeah, I the identity stuff that lets you detect your own things. That's a very invested art focused way of thinking about identity, and I think there is more to identity. But that's a very practical way of thinking about identity. Do we want to talk about the last spiritually sort of thing? It's kind of different, and I did want to bring it up because, you know what? Connection and identity are in that spiritual quadrant on this Veracami table. And then there's two other things. There's investiture. We kind of are talking about investiture all through this.
Yeah.
But there's one other thing that's weird, and that's fortune. And so let's talk about fortune a little bit.
Let's do that.
So I asked Brandon about fortune because Odium says at the end of Oathbringer to Teravangian something to the effect of that Teravangian did this without access to fortune or the spiritual realm.
This being the creation of the diagram.
Yeah, this being the creation of the diagram. Thank you.
Mhm.
And Brandon described it to me as fortune is a spiritual property. That's why I'm using that terminology. Thanks, Brandon. Every time you see into the future, you are using the spiritual realm is definitely involved.
Yeah.
But every time you're using the spiritual realm, you're not using fortune
Necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
So fortune's just a way to do future sight, and kind of, I would say a classic example of fortune is Hoyd knowing where he needs to be. He doesn't cognizantly know that. But there is this implication that he's using some fortune to know, yes, I know I need to be here. I don't know why, but I'll figure out why.
Was the Hoyt thing explicitly confirmed to be fortune?
No, but there was a famously paraphrased word of Brandon that said, Hoyd uses Ferrochemy to know where he needs to be, and it really does sound like fortune, especially with the Irie, saying coincidences could be an application of fortune.
So I'm gonna slightly reinterpret this.
Okay.
I think that future sight is always connected to fortune, because he's saying that when you're using fortune, it's always connected to the spiritual realm, but to use fortune, you're always involving the spiritual realm, but in the spiritual realm, you're not always involving fortune. Whereas,
Yes.
if you're looking at someone's spirit web or manipulating someone's spirit web, you're using the spiritual realm, but you're not using fortune. I think that's more what he's going about here, rather than just you can do future sight without fortune. That I don't think is possible.
I guess I would need to be in a Shard's viewpoint on them seeing the future to be totally convinced. I think that's definitely possible.
Yeah,
Ian?
I think what fortune is viewing the future through the spiritual realm. I think that's what fortune is.
Okay.
So it's like, by definition, like, you can't do future sight without fortune.
I guess it's
'Cause that's
just
what
weird
it
that
is.
Odium separated the two, which
I never get the sense that Hoyd using fortune is him like looking into the future and then deciding I need to go here.
Well, it's
yeah.
there's more to it that
It doesn't sound like an active thing. Like it sounds like maybe he and this is probably not the case, but maybe he like taps a fortune mind
It's,
and then just
Right.
goes, hey, do I go left or do I go right?
or some
Tap the
equivalent
mind.
of a fortune mind,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Or
Gains
I don't think
access
it's
to fortune and just
always
lets.
it's not always like an active, like, I am viewing the future. But it's like, in some way, like, the way I am acting right now is being influenced by what is to come. It's like, because for a long time we thought, like, oh, fortune, that's luck.
Yeah.
Where
It
it's
does.
like,
And-
I'm going to like on a roulette wheel, I'm gonna pick the winning spot because I'm lucky. It's like, but no, it's like, I am connecting to the future, whereas I know that it lands on that thing, so I'm gonna put it on that thing.
There is definitely merit to both of these
Mhm.
interpretations. So Vivenna in Oathbringer mentions fortune in regards to Kaladin. Well, actually, what Vivenna says, I was looking at Kaladin's like vision, right? And what Vivenna says is, I can believe that through some tide of fortune, Kaladin Stormblessed has foreseen some danger. It's actually a little less specific than I thought.
And maybe also explain Odium. He mentions fortune because the diagram does effectively tell the future, but like, you could also use the spiritual realm to see the current connections of everything to predict the future, even without using viewing the future section of the spiritual realm.
Yeah, but he
So-
says without access to fortune or the spiritual realm.
I know, it's so weird.
Yeah, which that's kind of what I was just explaining.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like, you could just like use fortune to see the future of the spiritual realm, or you can just look at the current spiritual realm and for like just like research purposes,
Right,
and then using that information to extrapolate. Like, no, he was just looking at physical realm knowledge and
Yeah,
extrapolated the future.
yeah.
generally fortune use isn't like, I am literally seeing a vision. Like what Vivenna just seemed to say is, the reason why it was that Kaladin got to the right place in order to see a vision was due to fortune, if that makes sense. Because it's like some tide of fortune. Like, Kaladin didn't know that that's how that was going to end up. Whereas, like, seeing a vision of the future is not necessarily fortune.
So remember at the beginning where we said we might talk about destiny?
Oh, I mean, obviously on the hemalurgy table with the might steal destiny, I think we're thinking that it's related to fortune, capital F. So yeah, what are you thinking?
Well, I didn't really have much more than that, but it's just like that idea of like being pulled to a place to have the vision.
That's
like,
true.
That is very like, it was his destiny to be at that place, to have that vision.
There is some weirdness with that, because it feels like it's more than just like tapping some chromium mind for Hoyd to know where he needs to be. But obviously that's not what he's doing.
Using fortune doesn't necessarily always let you see the future, but it might bring you closer to where you are in the future. Like, it's connected to the future in some way, but it's not always literally looking at it.
Yeah, so I just disagree that all future sight is fortune, because visions of the future do not need to be of fortune.
That I disagree with.
Going all the way back,
Uh-huh.
one thing I definitely agree with is when Brandon says that fortune necessarily means spiritual realm,
Mhm.
if fortune is an attribute of the spiritual realm, like connection is, like
Yep.
identity is,
Yep.
then yeah, that's absolutely sensible, right?
Yep.
Not all future sight being a product of fortune is where I think I align with Ian, because you can gain access. So you can gain access to fortune. You can the same way you can gain a connection, let's say,
Sure.
and that can give you an idea, conscious or not, or conscious or sub, of a future event or a place that you. So maybe when Hoyd taps fortune or whatever he does, he sees himself in Kolinar, or he sees himself in this exact location on the Shattered Plains, or Unclaimed Hills, or whatever he was that he met Yasna. But you can also do the thing that shards appear to be doing, which is reading connections and kind of interpreting.
Yeah, interpreting. Easy.
Where things are going to go and how they're going to go, and then the farther away you look, it's like looking through a shattered glass, which is
A shattering window.
the farther away you look, the more fuzzy things become, because there are, well, more possible outcomes that interact with one another. But the reason I wanted to butt in, this is all just backlog, is when you brought up Vivenna.
Oh, by the way, your complaint I'm obviously cutting. And
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
just gonna
yeah,
cut
yeah,
to
yeah,
the
yeah.
part.
Yeah.
So you saying that is also going to be cut. That
Sure.
the fact that you are trying to butt in doesn't exist because
Oh.
you are just now talking, right?
Oh, okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. In that case,
So the reason I'm bringing this up is...
Oh, yeah. So, Vivenna, when you said the thing about her, it reminded me of the other time we saw Fortune referenced directly by a character, and that was in Secret History.
That's exactly right.
And it's interesting because they use the word differently. So Vivenna uses it almost as a divine will type of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Closer to destiny. And the Eyrie say, not every coincidence is a sign of someone drawing upon fortune. To them,
It's
fortune is a very... Yeah, it's very like... It's a thing. Like a connection is a thing.
Yeah, right.
That might be because they are more analytical. Like they have quantified what fortune is.
They probably know how to access it in some respect, right?
Whereas Vivenna is more like, hey, fortune is a thing that exists. Gravity is like, you can like measure gravity, or you can just say like gravity makes things fall. Like, like there's more than one way. Like there's more than one way of viewing it, and they're both valid.
The way I interpreted those two, Evgeni, is someone can draw upon fortune, but they don't necessarily know what they're gonna get. And so I can imagine that Vivenna, it could get easy to ascribe some sort of spiritual motivation to fortune because, like, you don't really know what you're going to get and what decides that. And so, like, I can imagine that fortune could be a thing that is personified, and those don't need to be inconsistent necessarily, if that makes sense.
I agree that some people in people who are Cosmere aware but not like super deep into the nitty-gritty things of mechanics could personify fortune. This is absolutely a thing that I think can happen, and I actually think Vivenna is doing exactly that. But I want to ask you, do you think Vivenna believes Kaladin or someone else in the group actively did spiritual manipulation to make sure that Kaladin gets to that place to get the vision? Or is she using it as a, this is how the wind blew?
Fortune exists regardless of whether you are manipulating it or not.
Okay. Connection exists regardless of if it's being manipulated.
Yes.
Identity exists regardless if it's being manipulated, as does investiture. Does fortune exist regardless of being... Can you use fortune, like see the future, like manipulate events as a person? Does it also exist as a thing that is happening in the spiritual realm that is just naturally determining, okay, which path is the Cosmere going down? Just like the natural progression of the Cosmere, that is fortune.
I was gonna grab that more as relating that to a attribute of someone's spirit web of themselves. I was gonna ask you guys if fortune was a property of you, that like someone who is lucky, they just have more fortune, or however that works. Like they don't need to
That's
necessarily...
true.
Like there could just be random spiritual DNA that is just like, well, there's more fortune in you, and that has some subconscious effects in stuff.
Like to tie it into the luck, it's just like they're better able to like pick the right direction to go, pick the right thing to bet on.
Yeah, I feel like that could be related in like a meta reason for Brandon. Why are some people lucky and some people feel unlucky? Let's have a magical property that does that, because a lot of these things do seem inspired by things, and fortune's definitely related to luck.
Yeah, and because like it's because it's not like they're literally seeing the future, but they're more attuned.
No, I
Okay,
see what
it's in
you're
the right
saying,
way.
and I hate it, but it kind of makes sense, and that makes me hate it even more.
Kaladin's good with the spear because he will be good with the spear. I mean, it's grouped in these same things with connection and identity, so I feel like there is some aspect of you that has some fortune.
Yeah.
Feel...
And it's like it's something you can store, so it has to be part of...
Right, yeah, that's exactly right. You know? You're
Okay.
saving... Which is very weird. Now, there's a few other fortune things that... Atium was apparently supposed to foreshadow fortune, which is weird.
Yeah, because it's foretelling the future, so it's...
Well, I still don't necessarily agree that every vision is definitely fortune. Like, that kind of depends on... We don't know that. There's a lot on fortune that we don't know. I think it's going to be the weirdest of these, honestly.
Well, let's look at a couple of visions that we have in the Cosmere. We have Atium, which you actually see future events. You have Renarin doing his panorama type of thing, where you also see future events. Very, very much like Atium, actually. You don't see like the exact progression of step by step, but you see a thing of the future. The death rattles are, I think, practically the same thing.
Yeah.
As what Renarin does. Night form, yeah.
Night forms get foresee things.
What am I missing? Sack.
Yeah.
One of the AVR.
Yep.
Practically the same thing, right?
Practically like Atium, yeah.
It actually is like working on the same principles as Atium.
Yeah.
Or Electron.
Kaladin.
Touching
seeing the thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Also very similar, I think. Although a little more symbolic than the others, right?
Light Song sees the future.
Returned.
Yeah.
Being returned might supercharge your fortune.
Investiture might supercharge your fortune. Who the crap knows? Like, there's so many. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember.
I know does explicitly like ask like you're invested, so probably more investiture does give you more fortune.
That actually makes a lot of sense because the returned could see things in those paintings, right? Kaladin could also see that, and that's because he is invested.
Yes. Although with Rhino specifically, I don't know if it's like it may be that the quote like the Oracle Ball that he has the crystal ball.
Requires investiture.
Yeah. And
True.
so it's just, if you're invested, you can see things. If you're not, like, you can't even activate the thing.
Yeah.
But it does sound like more investiture makes you able to
Do future sight in general, fortune things.
Yeah. So
Well,
I wonder if
There-
fortune is
sorry.
explicitly visual then.
I disagree.
Mm,
It's we as humans are very big on vision, but a blind person can still benefit from. Like,
Okay. Sure,
Adium
but-
visions are just how a person's brain is interpreting the information they are getting from Adium. They perceive that information as an Adium shadow because that's
Right. Yeah. Right.
But
Yeah.
a blind person could
But I'm
still
saying,
be able
like,
to do stuff.
if in the future we see somebody who sees visions of the future, can we go, hey, this person is probably drawing on fortune or interacting with fortune or something like that? Whereas if somebody else goes, here is this thing that's going to happen, I worked it out in my head, but like not worked it out mentally, but spiritually, then maybe they are using a different form of future. Like maybe they are following connections.
Functionally speaking, I think that is what fortune is.
Oh, that's a
Because
good
that
point,
is what
actually.
Adium is. It's using connections. Because like Adium looks at the spiritual realm, sees all the connections, and foretells the natural consequences of the current arrangement of things. It can be overcome, but like there's a natural progression there
I'm with you. I do
based
agree
on
with
the
that.
current connections.
But that contradicts with what I thought we agreed on, where fortune is a property, like it's a thing in your spirit web that you can store and tap.
Like my perception of that was that that property is your ability to deduce the future from those connections.
I think fortune's gonna be by far the weirdest of these because it's the easiest to personify as a weird force. Like, how much control does one have over fortune, their destiny, right? Like, how much is that? Is something controlling that? It's the weirdest one. I'm not sure. I think when you tap a chromium mind and you're grabbing more fortune than you would have at baseline for that person, that doesn't mean you're seeing visions. I think that just might mean weird coincidences might happen that are very convenient for what you're doing, which is kind of what the Irie are suggesting, that they were saying, hey, if a lot of coincidences are happening, maybe someone's using fortune, but not every coincidence is fortune.
Okay.
But this is a weird topic.
Fortune is weird. I think we did pretty good with connection. I think we did all right with identity.
Yeah, we talked about the identity field.
Fortune's just weird.
Well, the thing is, Brandon's pretty coy with fortune because he's saying he's holding off on someone using fortune until for later. So
Yeah.
I'm sure
He
we'll
needs to get to the end of the Cosmere so he doesn't reveal too much.
Yeah, that's certainly true. So this is gonna be very weird. I imagine characters are going to find this very weird when they're using fortune. Like, what does that mean? Are some people inherently more lucky than another? Like, I don't know if I agree with that. I just think that could be a possibility. If fortune is in your spirit web, that could be what that means.
Yeah, it's less that luck is a thing and that what we perceive as luck is a thing.
Knowing Brandon, some characters will probably use the term incorrectly as well, just to further muddle the waters.
Like Vivenna. Vivenna is
Yeah.
kind of ascribing it as it's this force that is like, you were lucky that you foresaw this thing, right?
She might just not know what fortune is that well herself, very well.
Probably. She doesn't seem very interested in the Cosmere as a mechanical thing. She's just doing her job.
I feel like even among people in Silverlight studying these, I imagine fortune is a thing of a great discussion.
Mhm.
Well,
Right.
sure, but Vivanna just doesn't even have interest in,
Oh, that's true.
in a lot of that.
And I don't. Well, yeah. Some fortune does need to be in your spirit web because you're storing and tapping it. So there is that in you. Fortune has the most implications of all this stuff.
Well,
I mean, connections and identity is very important, but fortune, I
It's the biggest
suppose,
wild
has the
card.
most exciting possibilities. That crazy stuff could happen if someone's really good with fortune. What does that look like? That's going to be crazy, and it's going to be awesome.
I think this is going to have to go back to how exactly is it that time doesn't matter in the spiritual realm,
I guess that's
and
true.
then fortune can tie into that.
Yeah.
So maybe it's your ability to like solidify, like if all times exist in the spiritual realm, like multiverse sense, all times, then maybe fortune is your ability to pick a timeline or to steer the canon into a specific
Sure.
timeline.
That's really interesting. All times are one in the spiritual realm because Future Sight is legendarily pretty bad in the Cosmere. Like, so you're kind of seeing possibilities into the spiritual realm. So the spiritual realm does kind of have some aspect of time in it. Because it's not like the future. If all times were one, and you looking into the spiritual realm, you could get any time, that kind of would indicate to me that those things are more set in stone. But that's definitely not what the case, right?
Here's where the quantum mechanics works in.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
The fortune wave collapses when someone.
oh no, no, oh no.
And so part of that might be that it's people from like the physical and cognitive realm, where time is very much a thing, looking into the spiritual realm.
Sure.
Like, even though like shards do exist primarily in the spiritual realm, like those vessels were born in
Sure.
the physical realm. That's going to affect them at a very fundamental level, which makes me very interested to see the creatures that live in the spiritual realm, which Brandon has said exist.
Yeah.
That's
I was-
crazy. I forgot
was-
about that.
Trying to find a way to bring the Rhythmatist at some point, which I recently reread because the Rhythmatist was going
So
to be
good.
a
Yeah.
Cosmere story.
Yep.
And there are creatures there that, even in this version of the book right now, are practically spiritual realm. Like they were
Yeah.
always going to be creatures from the spiritual realm.
Just now, it's
And
just not
looking-
called the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And looking at them in the Rhythmatist might give us some insight into how the spiritual realm is supposed to work.
Yeah.
They are now, granted, we don't know like anything about them from the Rhythmatist, and if
No.
Brandon would ever write the sequel,
Someday.
we might find out. But one thing that's unsurprising to them, to us about them, is that they are fascinated by the concept of time.
Fascinated and terrified.
Yes.
Interesting. God,
Um,
are you getting some Deep Space Nine vibes? You know, the wormhole creatures are like time's meaningless to them. Like maybe we'll see some creatures like that. Maybe we'll be able to talk to some creatures like that in the spiritual realm. That'd be crazy.
it would be, yeah.
Oh,
One
these are
thing
high level
that's-
fantasy concepts. That like Brandon, like, can I fit this into the Cosmere? Yeah. Let's put some creatures in the spiritual realm. Yeah, cool. It makes sense.
Yeah. So one thing about them is that they think the concept of time was invented by people, which may or may not have implications to the Cosmere. But if it does, then what? So one way I keep trying to think of the spiritual realm in a way that makes sense without time is kind of by ascribing a direction to. So the flow of time in our universe is the flow of entropy. things tend to get more chaotic as time progresses, and you can influence events in the future where you define it's a little cyclical, where you say, well, future is all the events that you can conceivably influence in some way, and the past is the set of all events that you can no longer influence in any way. This kind of mindset could be perhaps more appropriate to the spiritual realm, where there's no past and future, but there are still, I don't want to say timelines, but sets of events or sequences of events, like a stack of pictures, let's say, where some of them are more reachable or more easily reachable than others. And so fans of Doctor Who, I was going to say, would know convergence points, but they don't call them convergence points. Fixed points in the timeline, events in the timeline that will always be there. And so maybe there are events in the spiritual realm that have these like big paths that lead to them because they are for some reason inevitable or more likely than others. And those are in the future. And then all the events that have been in the past are unreachable for whatever reason. Maybe the connections there, if connections are indeed the paths of the spiritual realm, are viewable, like they are read-only.
Yeah, but that still implies a sense of time, because then it wasn't read-only and then it becomes read-only.
Mm-hmm.
It implies the sense of time to you. In the spiritual, like an event that we would say is in the past, in the spiritual realm is only different from other events because of how unreachable it is. And so you can have an event in the future that is equally an event that we would say is in the future, that is equally unreachable. And so in the spiritual realm, those two are functionally the same, but to us, because one of them has happened and the other one hasn't or never will, like we make the distinction, but the spiritual realm might not.
Okay. You
And so
kind
maybe
of lost me at the end there, but most of that I liked.
let me rephrase just the end.
Okay.
What if in the spiritual realm an event in the past that didn't occur, ad nauseam shattered in a different set of shards, and an event in the future that will never happen? What if these two are functionally the same in the spiritual realm?
I fundamentally disagree that there are events in the past that didn't happen, because there is only one past in the Cosmere. This isn't like a multiverse scenario. Brendan has explicitly said he's not doing multiverse with this, that like there is a single past and a single path to the future, but the future is unsettled.
Remember when every character is like, wow, looking to the spiritual realm, mortals, your mind will just break. That's where I feel like we are right now.
Yes. But I do have something. Have any of you read A Wrinkle in Time?
No.
Okay. I read it once many, many years ago.
Oh,
One of
great.
the only things I remember was this idea that there were two kinds of time.
Okay.
Chronos and Kairos.
Okay.
Chronos is like the measured time. It's like you can like 1 second, 1 year. These are all like chronos.
Intervals.
And Kairos, it's like this unmeasurable, just infinite thing that like, so what if like in the spiritual realm there is this Kairos, there is this progression from the past to the future, but like you can't measure it. Like it's either past or present. Like it's not like, oh, that is a year in the past. It's just that is the past. And then there's this massive web of the future that slowly is condensing down into the present and being recorded into the past. And that like we in the physical realm, because obviously we are in the Cosmere,
Yeah,
can like
we are in the physical realm.
Measure time as it goes by, but like I don't know. It was something that popped in my head. I don't know how applicable that
Do
is
we
or
ever-
how well I
Probably
explain this
scholars-
concept.
There are probably scholars in Silverlight who agree with Ian, and some who agree with Evgeni.
Yeah.
Some who tear their hair out.
I think there's
Yeah.
more than a few who tear their hair out, but I imagine they're confused about the spiritual realm as well.
Mhm.
Well, that at least makes me feel better.
Yeah.
And I apologize to fans of A Wrinkle in Time who have actually read that entire series and are like
I didn't
horrified.
even know it
of
was a
what I just said.
series.
Yeah, there's multiple books in it,
Oh.
or like that universe or something. I don't know.
If you are a wrinkle in time, leave us a comment and tell us.
If you're a
how it
fan of
works.
science and physics and vector calculus and fields and stuff, comment below. And if you're frustrated with pedanticness, I'm sorry.
Too bad.
All right, we have. You know what time it is? It is time for Who's That Cosmere Character?
This character is from Roshar.
Menace.
Tien, Tom,
Raise.
Hoyd in drag on a horse.
It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? Caw.
I mean, it's always been time for Who's That Cosmere Character, and it will always be time for Who's That Cosmere Character.
That's true. That's right. All
Who's
these
that
char-
Cosmere character is always happening in the spiritual realm.
That's right.
and
that's
it
right.
really doesn't matter because all places are one, and therefore all characters. Well, no, but their identities are different, so that's fine.
Yep. This first one, guys, is sent in by Steel Dancer.
Oh, hi, Steel.
Hey.
Clue 1. This character is definitely, absolutely not town.
Okay, because I was gonna guess Dalton.
Yeah.
Yes. For the listeners who don't go in Discord, Steel Dancer really likes town.
Mhm. Ash.
No.
Yes, Rian.
No. I know this clue is not a lot to go off.
Ishar.
No. Because clue 2, this character is young.
What does it mean to be young?
Tien.
I-we.
No.
Oridin.
No.
I said Tien.
No. Oh. All right. Clue 3. This character has kissed someone.
Vin.
No.
Siri.
Dang it, that
No.
was my.
you know
That's what I
what?
was gonna say when
You-
time ran out and I couldn't.
You know what it is?
Um,
You two were
it
just
looks like-
connected in the spiritual
Yes.
realm, which
Well,
is
I
why
was
you're
gonna
thinking
say-
the same thing.
I was gonna say we were drawing on fortune at the same time.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
lot of-
Well, that what is drawing upon connection if not just or drawing upon fortune if not just
Establishing
making new
connections.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Why not?
We've got a lot of resonance today. Spook.
No. Clue 4. This character is killed by their own side.
Dunny.
It is Dunny. Clue 5 was this character sings with rock.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah, I was going to guess Hrathen because
Oh.
he's killed by a Furidel.
Yeah, right, yeah. It is kind of a hard clue, I would say. That's a good one.
Yeah, I was gonna at some point I was gonna guess Sen. Because I thought for a moment he was trampled by
Right.
his own people, but
yeah, but he was murdered by the
I was conflating Sen and
By a
and
very
a little bit.
particular Shardbearer.
Yes.
How did Ken, the singer Ken, how did her daughter die? His
Her
daughter.
daughter's
died.
not dead. Or her daughter's not dead.
It's still alive. Okay.
Yeah. There's
that's
no
right, that's
there's no instance of
Okay.
mentioned that Vi
was trying to think
is
if-
dead.
Okay.
I don't think.
I don't think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
I remember those characters' names. Hey.
That's good.
All right. This next one was sent in by Celestial Blue 3.
Ah.
Clue 1. This character is non-human.
Arklo.
No.
Human.
No. What does it mean to be human? What is their identity like?
Edgley.
No.
Thank you.
Do we
I'm
know
all the
that
way with
Edgley is not human?
Regardless,
Yeah.
they're shards, so they don't really count as human anymore.
I mean, when you use the vessel name.
that's right. This character has shin eyes.
Hoyd.
No,
Right, I know.
no.
Not human with shin eyes.
Yeah, I just connected that myself as well.
Connected, capital C.
What do they do with the eyes?
I mean, I have an idea, but I've already guessed. So
I don't know if you will all vehemently protest to this or not, but we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this.
Ten of Est.
No, that's all three of you.
I'm guessing that shin eyes means
Yes.
just like basically no epicanthic fold. So pretty much
Yeah, that's my
anybody
assumption
who's
as well.
not from.
yeah.
Clue 3. This character is in multiple series.
Non-human. Oh,
Hoyd.
No.
I already
it's
guessed
not
Hoyd.
Oh,
Yep.
dang it.
Rip that guess.
Yep.
Wait, in multiple series?
I mean,
Because
In a manner of
last-
speaking,
does this character have an actual name?
yes.
That is
yes.
okay. And what does it mean to be in
That's-
multiple series?
That's
I'm
a good.
Melon.
No, it is not Milan.
Someone did guess Arklow, right?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah, that was
he's
Ian's
only in
first
one
guess.
series.
Yeah. Look, he could have some. He could. Sleepless have been world hoppers. He could.
Well, no, but he doesn't look too. Well, I mean, like
He
I guess
could.
the eyes are the same. It's the Kremlings that form.
Oh no. No. And those Kremlings, do they have epicanthic folds or not?
I don't like these clues.
Do you want to pass?
I don't want to pass. I wanna waste my guess on Says.
On who?
Says. Sazed. Sazed. Harmony.
Ah, no. Clue 4. I see where you're going with that. I had to process that for a second. This character notably kills another of their kind.
Tensoon?
It is Tensoon.
Yeah, I guessed the wrong Kendra.
I know. You said Milan. I thought you guys would not have liked the multiple series, but it's like, yeah, Era 2, I guess.
No, I don't like the eyes. Because I thought about guessing
Yeah, that was the other thing. That was
a Khandra at some point.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, yeah, but they don't.
I was guessing the World Hopper Khandra in my head, but it's like
Mm.
We
we
know
don't know
we-
their name.
we explicitly know that Scadrians have they don't have epicanthic folds, right?
Yeah.
Seems like Demu is described that way.
Yeah, but Khandra.
They could make epicanthic folds.
They could.
Yeah. And clue 5, this character has a broken soul.
Do all of these clues work for Odium?
If you interpret non-human broadly as shards, then
I don't
Hmm.
know if Odium has a broken soul.
he's called the broken one.
The broken one reigns.
It's debatable.
But what does that mean?
I mean, yeah, but like, what does it mean to have shin eyes, right?
What does it mean to be non-human? How what does your identity need to look like? My goodness. Well, thank you, Celestial Blue, for that Who's That Cosmere character. You can send your Who's That Cosmere characters to wtcc@17shard.com. And you know what else you can do? You follow us below at 17shard.com for all your news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. And pedanticness. Lots of that, too. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube. You can leave us a review on iTunes. You can support our pedanticness on Patreon. And we'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Remember, listeners, the wheel weaves.
That's not this universe.
Yeah, that's
The wheel.
But it is
turns.
Brandon.
that's
All
okay.
all places are
Bye.
one, therefore all universes are one.
No. Boo. Bye.
I reckon there's this Cosmere.
No, you're fired. You're definitely fired now. Ah.
Oh, we match, Joff.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
you're just
Different
noticing.
colors.
it seemed
I have a
appropriate
Cosmere
for.
shirt too. So
oh, I moved too fast.
have
Now
a maroon shirt, so
wow,
It's beautiful.
I do not match.
that's not a spiritual property. Maroon.
Some might say
It's
there's a
Brandon's
connection.
favorite color, actually.
Oh,
so
really? Oh, you
yeah.
learned something.
I'm pretty sure.
no, hold up. No, I think it's cool in blue.
At one point in time,
Are we
he said
debating
it,
Brandon's
but
favorite color?
Yes.
Yes.
That's
All
happening right now.
colors are one in the spiritual realm. Kaladin is good with the spear because he will be good with the spear. That's the spiritual realm.
FanX 2018.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
What is your favorite color? Usually, I say maroon.
Usually.
Got it.
So I
Right.
do match in a really weird way.
In the spiritual realm, you match.
Yes.
Welcome back to Physics Cast. Cosmere Physics Cast.
Your identity.
I have claimed Evgeni's cam and
My identity
And
is
green.
green.
What? Why am I gone?
we don't know.
Your identity is now green. Ba Inamishram has stolen all your other connections. You are only green. You're the platonic ideal of green. Only that. Welcome back. How was the spiritual realm? How green was it? Did you meet cultivation?
It was very green. It was the ideal amount of green.